again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. We've got a good topic for you today, getting back to our roots, so let's do it. Have you ever encountered something paranormal? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. A few years ago, one night at around 3 a.m., my wife and I were sleeping, and I feel myself slowly waking up from a really deep sleep. My eyes started lifting up as soon as they focused on the lamp on my dresser. It slid off and shattered on the floor. My wife and I quickly sat up and looked at each other, horrified at the startling noise. We agreed we would clean it in the morning and went back to sleep. The next morning when we woke up, the lamp was at the foot of the bed, about 5 feet from where it fell, completely intact and not broken at all. We're still trying to make sense of it. From 3 until 13, I lived in a nice home out near Yosemite National Park. Nothing super spectacular about it, 4 bedrooms, a den, dining room, the norm. Just down a little dirt road, and if you've ever been around those parts, you'll know, miles away from civilization. My whole childhood, I was visited by this girl in white. She never spoke. I would just wake up at night and see or feel her there. I asked my dad, and his response every time was, "The men in our family can see ghosts." My rationale of this, I'm a skeptic, I remain that to this day, but the story I'm telling made me question, was that we had some sort of mild schizophrenia running through our family. It didn't bother me. She didn't look like other people. There was something off about her. After my father died, my mother decided to sell the house and went through a realtor. We never once had contact with the buyers, only knew them by name. The buyers had a son who went to the same school as our old neighbors, dear friend of the family, and the son apparently came to school without sleeping repeatedly, complaining that there was a girl who watched him at night and that he needed to get out. Ugh, shivers up my spine every time I remember this. The only one I have is when I was in 4th grade. When I was little, I would always sleep with my door open. I went through a phase where I would wake up between 3 and 4 a.m. every night, and every single night, I would hear footsteps walking up my stairs, around my living room, through my dining room, across my kitchen and down my hallway. They would always stop right before my doorway, then turn around and go back into the basement. But one night they didn't stop. What I saw was a shadow of a little girl or boy, couldn't tell, walk right in front of my doorway, look at me for a few seconds, then it walked away, back down the stairs. I slept with the door closed the next night. A friend of mine was taking a picture of herself and her daughter kissing. In the background. You can clearly see a figure that was not there. She had ghost experts come in and check around the house and found nothing. After some research, they found one of the previous owners was a mortician or ran a funeral home or something. I've known this girl for years, and it would completely shock me if this was fabricated, as I saw how upset she was and how much money she dished out for experts. They no longer live there. Woke up one night to a loud screeching noise, similar to the screech the Nazgul made in Lord of the Rings. The entire room was flashing rapidly in bright colors. My computer turned on for a split second, enough to get the fans rattling, and my computer screen had static on it. The entire ordeal was over in less than a second. I still don't know if it really happened, or if my brain was just playing tricks on me. So I've never posted this because I always get to these threads way too late. So I get home from my job as a server at midnight. One of my roommates was in the Navy and was deployed at the time, and the other one was at his girlfriend's house. I cook myself dinner, and as I'm cooking, my dog starts growling and barking towards the middle of the room at nothing. This is especially weird because she never, ever barks. She was a rescue, and I brought her as a sense of security when I'm home alone. I'm a female, and I could never get her to bark at anyone. I dismiss her barking as odd, but I finish cooking and eat. I start to clean and turn the sink on because it takes forever to get hot, but right when I turned around, the sink turned off on its own. Again, I think it's odd, but I don't really think it's worth freaking out over. The hair on the back of my dog is standing up straight, but no one's home and it's midnight, so I figure I'd just tough it out, even though I was beginning to get a little spooked. After cleaning, I go in the bathroom and sit on the sink to pluck my eyebrows. My bathroom was small, with the sink immediately to your right as you enter, with the toilet next to it, bathtub at the end, and toilet paper dispenser directly across the toilet. It was a really narrow room, so you could reach the TP while standing on the toilet. So, the way I was sitting, the toilet paper dispenser was behind me. After 2 to 3 minutes, I hear a weird noise behind me, so I turn around and I shit you not, the whole roll of toilet paper was unraveling, fast as F, like someone was pulling it. I noped the F out of the bathroom. The door was closed and it had no windows, so it couldn't have been a breeze. I put a leash on my dog and ran out of the apartment faster than Usain Bolt. By the time this happened, it was already around 2 a.m. None of my friends were awake, so I spent the night sitting outside of the door to my apartment. When I went back in the next morning, the whole roll of toilet paper was on the ground, and the roll was probably 3/4 full. I'm talking about a good 5 to 10 meters of toilet paper. After that day, I never had an odd experience quite like that one ever again, but one of my roommates did mention that a few times he'd come home and find every door and cabinet in the place open, when he'd specifically remembered closing them and leaving them that way when he'd left. This was when I was on vacation out of state, and her other roommate was still deployed. Okay, definitely some odd things going on in that house and that bathroom. So our skeptics out there, how could the toilet paper unfurl itself? We moved into a house and everything was really quiet for the first 6 months or so. The neighbor told us that the people who lived there before had moved after their teenage son died in a motorcycle accident. Then after the first 6 months my dad died, not in the house, after that, stuff started to happen. I would have friends sleep over, and one night my friend woke me up because she said there was a young guy standing in my bathroom. So I went and checked and nothing was there. Over the next few years, just about any friends that stayed overnight had said they saw the tall, blonde young guy walking around the house. We did have a few other things happen, like a wine glass was on the counter and it broke. No one was touching it, it just shattered on the counter. Another time, during the winter, we had the heater on, and my room was always the warmest in the house, and it was ice cold as you walked across my bedroom to the bathroom that was connected. The creepiest thing was when my boyfriend was sleeping on the couch in the middle of the night, and he said he woke up to a young guy pushing him off onto the floor. He said the guy didn't say anything, but my boyfriend at the time knew that he had to leave, and he did. He wouldn't stay at my place after that. Edit. I've gotten a lot of crap about the wine glass, so I'll explain in better detail. My mom has a huge collection of glassware. She has so many there wasn't anywhere to put anymore, so we just set them on the counter. The wine glass had been sitting there for a long time. No one had touched it. It hadn't just come out of the dishwasher or anything like that. Basically, she bought it, put it on the counter, and never touched it again. When it broke, no one was near it. Only me and my mom were there, and they were like at least 10 feet away. Could it have been something like a crack in the glass? Maybe, but at the time it startled us, and we thought it was weird. I was just sharing one of the many things that happened. This is one of 2 paranormal experiences I've had. I've had a hard time wrapping my head around. It's a long read, but worth it. I've suffered from insomnia as far back as I can remember. I was in 2nd grade, and it was really early in the morning. I was around 5 or so. I had a little TV on my nightstand and was definitely watching Lord of the Rings on VHS. I had the volume up super loud because my ceiling fan always made a ruckus throughout the night. I was super into the movie when all of a sudden, all the sound around me started to slowly fade away. I remember I became confused and reached to turn my TV up thinking it had broken, but then I realized the sound of the fan had faded with it. The only way I can describe it is comparing it to someone turning the volume down on a car radio. I was suddenly overwhelmed by an intense feeling of euphoria. I've never experienced anything like it. I absolutely cannot describe how utterly at peace I felt. I was able to comprehend what was happening, and then it clicked in my head. I was dying. Keep in mind that I'm in 2nd grade, so this is pretty intense conclusion, but I just knew. I rolled over onto my back, ready to, and excited to accept my fate. That was when I saw it. There was a large white figure in my doorway, just hovering and pulsating a white aura. I quickly panicked and began calling out for my brother. His room was across the hall. The figure glided to the end of my bed and just sat there watching. I'm not really sure how much time passed, but the figure suddenly vanished, sound came back, and the euphoria disappeared. I jumped out of bed and ran into my brother's room, where I practically flew into his bed. He woke up, and when he saw how panicked I was, he began to panic as well. I was hysterical and just kept telling him it was a ghost. We did what any other kid would do and hid under the covers. After a while, we got anxious, and I bravely made a peephole in my blanket to check the time on the clock, hoping that it would be daylight soon. 5:30. The clock read 5:30 in the morning. Then the phone rang, and it rang and rang and rang. Me and my brother started to panic even more. Then silence. Once again, it began to ring and ring and ring. We jumped out of bed and took turns running from light switch to light switch until we had a light path to the living room. Our house was 5,000 plus square feet. This was not an easy task. We got to the living room and watched cartoons until Mom woke up. She was livid, yelling at us for being up so early. I told her I saw a ghost, which only made her more upset. My brother, who was always tormenting my irrational fears, got mad at her and started telling her this wasn't a joke and it wasn't my imagination. I started telling her to check the phone because I saw the ghost around 5:30 and it must have been the ghost calling, kid logic. She went to check the phone and went to the other room for a while. Suddenly she wasn't upset anymore. When we asked if it was the ghost, she said it was a telemarketer. She was so nice about it, she let me sleep in her room the next few days. I thought maybe since it was my brother's birthday that day, that she just didn't want to argue, but she never let me sleep in her room. I got home from school once on the 15th. I saw the ghost in the early hours on the 13th. My mom called me into the family room and told me to sit in her lap and that she needed to tell me something. I obliged. My great-grandma passed away in the hospital at 5:30 a.m., and the phone calls were my grandma calling to notify us. Me and great-grandma were extremely close. To this day, I get chills thinking about it. I know that there are a few ways to explain the occurrence, but I know for a fact it was 100% a paranormal experience. Me and my brother still back me up on it today. This would probably get buried, but here's my story. I live in Mississauga, and I have a Hungarian Kovask named K2, after the famous peak in Pakistan. I go for daily walks every day with him, once in the morning and once at night. Most nights are pretty uneventful except when K2 stops in front of a bench near a thickly wooded area and just stares at it. At first I try to ignore it, thinking K2 just sits there for rest or there are squirrels nearby. However, lately I've been noticing K2 getting pretty aggressive at the bench, like it does when it's about to fight another dog. I try to ignore it, but then one day K2 starts barking really loudly and drags me to fight whatever is seeing. Now, this is pretty dangerous, especially during the winter, as it's brutal in Canada, and if I slip in the snow, there's no one to help me. I had to use all my energy to drag him away from that area, and I was kind of spooked and kind of excited. I asked my dad, who believes in paranormal stuff, how to deal with this, and he said, if there is paranormal stuff going around, then it's best that you either change the walking route or go talk to it and tell it that we mean it no harm. Naturally, I chose the latter because I like walking in the forest and it's so peaceful, and walking through that bench area was the only way to get to it. Me and K2 went, and when we got to the bench, I said loudly, "Peace be upon you, we mean no harm. If you can walk away whenever my dog is around, I would greatly appreciate it." I shit you not, this thing actually got up and left. I can tell you because K2's head was moving wherever this thing was moving. I was so scared at this point, but it was worth it in the end, as it made the walking that much more peaceful. However, lately, whenever my dog gets fixated at something in the house, I get pretty scared. Note, sorry if my English doesn't make any sense. Not my language. You agree. Okay, I've got a good one. I'm not usually one that believes in the paranormal, but this made me question everything. My girlfriend had always told me her house was haunted. I'd always hear creaks and stuff upstairs and the occasional footstep, but I always played it off as normal house noises until one night in August of this year. We were downstairs watching TV like usual, about to go to bed when we both got a very weird feeling, almost simultaneously. She gave me a weird look, and I didn't think anything of it, so we went to bed. After a few minutes on Twitter and made me on Reddit, we put our phones down to roll over and go to sleep. Then we both heard the words, "Good night," in a child's voice. Doesn't seem too strange, right? Well, considering there weren't children in the house, we both looked at each other like, why would you say goodnight like that? Then we realized neither of us had said it, and we left her room fairly quickly. We went downstairs to lay on the couch and watch a little TV and come to our senses and figure out where those words had come from. Then we both got down to that someone's watching you feeling. Not like, oh, that dude's over there has been staring at me, but something will not take their eyes off me no matter what I do feeling. So we decided it best to leave the house. We went to walk out the front door, but right as we were about to open it, we heard the child's voice again. This time it came from the door, but right as we were about to open it, we heard the child's voice again. This time it came from the balcony right above our entryway. Clear as day, a child said, "Mommy and Daddy." We look at each other. I may or may not have screamed, and we ran to my car and decided to drive to the one place that was open in our shanty small Oregon town, Walmart. The problem was, as soon as we got in the car, we knew something had come with us, and it was pissed at us for leaving. The second we got into my Honda, there was nothing but the feeling of hate instilled into both of us for no reason whatsoever. Whatever it was filled the car with hate. It's now about 4 a.m., and I have to be at work in 5 hours, so we decide to go back to her house and try to get some sleep and see what happens. We walk in the front door, nothing but quiet. We walk up the stairs, turn right, and suddenly it sounds like a dog growling from her upstairs bathroom. It takes me a second, though, because I grew up with dogs, and all I could think was that it was just mine in there being weird. 5 seconds later, I realize I'm at her house, and no dog has ever set paw in there. Something was effing growling at me, and I had no idea what. At this point, I'm effing pissed at whatever is happening because I'm tired and need to sleep for work. So I come up with this brilliant plan of talking to shit to whatever causing all these problems. The only thing that sticks out at this point is me yelling, "If you're so pissed, do something about it." Right after that, I feel something pull my shirt. I turn around thinking my girlfriend is playing a very unfunny joke on me, but no, she was still downstairs. Something pulled my shirt. After that, I decided it was time to leave for the night. At 6 a.m., we get into my car and drive to my mom's house. The car ride was much less hate-filled, and all the bad feelings were gone for a while. I went to work while my girlfriend slept at my mom's place, and when I got off, we went back to her house to check on things. Everything seemed fine, except for the one picture of us she had hanging on her wall was knocked to the ground like something out of an effing horror movie. But she was too exhausted to care about my safety at that point, and I was so tired I was willing to let whatever was there kill us, just so I could get some rest. 2 weeks later, we moved out and haven't had any problems since. I never believed in the paranormal at all until this happened. I still question it. My brain thinks there has to be a logical explanation to all of it, and I'm sure there is, but I know she believes, and a piece of me believes that there's something else in that house. When I was a dumb kid, my brother and I were playing around on the stairs. I was at the top jumping around in a pillowcase. I slipped, obviously, and went tumbling down backwards. Everything went into slow motion, as things sometimes do when your life is in peril. As I was flipping over and over, the back of my skull getting closer by the second to smashing into the hard concrete basement floor, I noticed a movement coming from the dark basement. Suddenly, a large bag of dog food flew across the room as if hurled by an invisible hand with absurd precision and interposed itself between my head and the floor. My skull smashes into the bag a millisecond later, spraying kibble instead of skull fragments around the room. My brother and I were both slack-jawed and confused. The flying bag had traveled at least 10 feet, likely saving me from death or serious injury. I used to think this was evidence for God or angels, or that I have some kind of purpose, but I realize this evidence is for nothing in particular except that life is bizarre and unexpected things can and do happen. Guardian angel, supernatural entity, or a misplaced bag of food that saved you from serious injury. Either way, good. So this was several years ago when I was a total deadbeat and lived with my then girlfriend's parents. They had a tri-level house with the basement that contained our living space and my girlfriend and I's bedroom. Upstairs was the living space for everyone else, the dining room and kitchen. The third level had the master bedroom and 2 additional bedrooms for my girlfriend's sisters. I was home alone one night with her parents off with friends, my girlfriend at a friend's, and her sisters were at an all-night church thing. I elected to stay home and play World of Warcraft all night. Where my computer and desk sat, right above my head was an AC vent. Often I could hear her sisters playing in her room from that vent. I was leveling my paladin or something, when I heard laughing and giggling coming from the vent. Nobody was supposed to be home, so my heart picked up. I glanced at the clock on my computer and it read 1:36 a.m. I remember this all very distinctly. I went to go investigate and headed upstairs. This was the landing that sits at the top of those stairs. You can turn left and either go upstairs or go into the kitchen. I climbed the second set of stairs and opened the first door on the left, which was her young sister's room. Inside, I used the light of my phone to illuminate as best I could. I saw a small figure, what I assumed was just a small girl wrapped in a white sheet, in the center of the room. Cue pants shitting. This young girl stops playing with the dolls and slowly looks up at me. It lets out the most ear-shattering scream you can imagine. My skin crawls just thinking about it, and my chest tightens just remembering it. I wish I could tell you what transpired, but I remember waking up at the bottom of the landing, right next to the door of the kitchen. I stumbled into the kitchen to get a drink of water and contemplate what the F just happened. I glanced at the clock on the microwave. The clock read 4:46 a.m. We never found the sheet the next day, but the dolls the figure were playing with were sitting in the middle of the room, away from the toy chest, which they were inside of that afternoon when she cleaned her room, which is across the room.